Now I know there are some woodworkers out there that have this mindset that virtually everything in woodworking has to be made out of wood, but that's truly not the case. Now one of the more recent trends, perhaps in the last 10 years, is to use glass-fronted cabinet doors. Now of course these would almost always be made in a frame and panel type construction, unless the glass is very heavy, in which case you can use it as a door. Now the interesting thing about glass is that it can add a tremendous amount of color, texture, as well as character to a finished piece of furniture. Now I've got some stained glass pieces here that we can use for this discussion. Now when we think in terms of stained glass, we're always thinking in terms of cutting up the glass into smaller pieces and then using different techniques, soldering them all together. That's really not necessary in some cases. Many of the stained glasses are just beautiful by themselves. Now here we've got a very interesting one that's got some clear, some reds or maroons in it. All around just a very attractive piece of glass. So you can use stained glass in its entirety. You don't have to cut it up and then solder it all back together again. Now the interesting thing about stained glass is its opacity. Oftentimes we think in terms of a cabinet door where we want to conceal the contents in that cabinet. Some glasses are very clear, some are translucent and so forth, and they give different textures. This particular glass, of course, is very roughly textured, but it's very, very pretty. Some glasses are almost opaque, allowing very, very little light to show through. But to give you a feel for how you can incorporate glass into cabinet doors, I think it's best to compare it when you're looking through it to see the contents on the inside. Like I mentioned a moment ago, it's often important to try to conceal the looks of the contents of the cabinet. You may want to go with an opaque glass or a very clear glass, but let's take a look at what the effects are of an object. Now most of you may recognize this. There's a good-looking fella on the cover of this very interesting DVD video magazine. But let's make like we're going to put a door front with glass. Now this particular piece of glass, very opaque, very dark in colors, and as you can see, it's nicely textured. It could be used in both orientations, and it looks attractive both ways. Another opaque glass, one that we just looked at a moment ago. Again, completely blocks out the view to the inside of the cabinet. Again, use it in any orientation that pleases your eye. This one in a similar color range to that last one, somewhat of a pinkish color. Here you can see through it. It's relatively translucent, but it's got a nice color to it, and that may work out well with the rest of your cabinet design. And as you can see, it pretty well obscures the contents inside of our makeshift cabinet. And of course, we've got many different colors of glass that we can work with. This one is almost like a frosted window. If you live in the Midwest or in the northern states and you've seen frost build up on your windows, well, that's what it's going to look like. For those of you down south, we often see this in our windows during the winter time, especially in older homes. Colors can play a very important role in cabinet design. Sometimes you just want to add a little bit of color. This dark blue really is a striking color. It would only work on a certain type of furniture with certain colors of wood. Probably I'm thinking somewhere along the lines of a very dark wood or perhaps a very white colored wood. But again, it conceals the contents of the cabinet. Here's another blue piece of glass, nicely textured again. Good color this time. I think this blue would work with many different colors of wood, and as you can see, it greatly obscures the contents. Now this particular piece of glass is one of my favorites. It's very dark brown. It's just barely translucent. You can barely see through it. But I think on wood, it would work better in a vertical orientation. Now as you can see, it's very rippled. and it has almost a wood-like grain texture to it, albeit very coarse. But being in those brown colors, browns and blacks, it would work with just about any type or species of wood. Very, very opaque. Now, of course, you could use clear glass. It's not going to give you any concealment to the contents of the inside of a cabinet. But there's a number of clear colored glass that really has a great look to it. Now we'll start out with a very basic one here. And of course, it's frosted glass. You can barely see through it. It is translucent. The light will go through, but you're really not seeing any detail on the other side. Here are some interesting textures that I find very, very fascinating. This one called glue chip. It's got almost a pattern, but it's random. And it's got a wonderful texture to it. Here's one that's very interesting. Obviously a very clear pattern. It's frosted. It's got some leaf or floral patterns in it. Some geometric pattern to it. Very attractive glass. This one, titled Autumn, has again a leaf texture to it. It's very subtle. Here's another very attractive glass panel. This one is what they call bamboo. And as you can see, it's got bamboo stalks and some leaves, floral arrangement. It's heavily frosted for good concealment. Now there's many textured glasses too. And as you can see, it's blocking out the view inside pretty well. Plenty of lights getting through. Nice random pattern to it, and it's heavily textured. This one they call ice crystals. And again, if you live in the winter climates, you'll get the idea what they're talking about with ice crystals. This one's called Baroque. Very clear glass. It's not going to do much for concealment, but it does have some very interesting patterns in it, as you can see here. And those patterns perhaps are enough to draw your attention to the glass as opposed to the contents of the cabinet. Just a very pretty piece of glass. This one's called Delta Frost. As you can see, obviously heavily frosted. Some wonderfully textured patterns in here that are just crystalline in nature. Just very, very pretty. Here's one that I think would work out well with a historic piece or a period piece of furniture. Heavily textured, good light blocking or view blocking. Nice patterns in it. This particular piece of glass is called English Flemish. It's very, very clear, but as you can see, it's wavy. It's got a real soft texture to it, and it creates this wavy pattern. All around a very interesting piece of glass. I think it would be great for an antique or an old reproduction cabinet where you wanted the effect of the lower quality or less clarity glasses of years gone by. This one's called Water. I think you'll kind of understand why. Gives the effect of water. This one's called Antique. You can just pick up, if I get this tilted right, there's some lines through the glass. It's very clear. Doesn't block any of the view of the inside of the cabinets, but those lines give it a nice antique look and feel. This one, well, I think the name is pretty obvious. It's called Squares. You get a square textured pattern, almost a glass block wall look. So something in the periods of time where glass block was used heavily, this would fit perfect in a piece of furniture like that. Now, one thing I'd like you to also note, I'm going to move this back and forth. And this is what I would like to talk about with glass as well as part of your design. Glass gives you motion. At least these textured glasses do. Clear glass, you're not going to get motion. Now imagine walking past a cabinet with this type of glass door on it, and your of course viewing angle moves along, and you're going to look at the contents differently, and you'll get motion inside the cabinet. So it's another dimension to furniture design that has to be considered when working with the different glasses. Half-inch reeded glass, again, here's that motion I'm talking about. That's just another dimension that you have to work with when working with all these specialty textured glasses. Now you may be wondering where you can get these various pieces of glass. Now these clear textured ones, you're not going to go to your local hardware store or home center and get them. They might have some specialty glasses, but they won't have this particular set. Now I got this from Rockler Woodworking. They sell a sample kit that comes in a box this size, and it holds all those clear samples we've been demonstrating. And that's a very, very good device to have if you're making furniture for other people. Now, as we were going through these demonstrations, we were talking about view blocking, translucence, patterns, textures, motion, and so forth. If you're building a piece of furniture for someone else and you're trying to get them to go with glass and select a particular type, a demonstration just as we had done here is a very good and powerful tool, because now they can experience that those characteristics of light blocking, translucency, pattern, texture, as well as the motion effect. Some people may not want any motion at all, so those reeded or square block glasses might not be the best choice for them. Now the colored glass that I've been showing you, this you can get at any stained glass store. Look in your yellow pages in the phone book for stained glass, and you'll probably find a few stores in a short driving distance from where you live. And they'll have racks and racks and racks of this different types of glass. Now this is one of those products that comes in different sizes. It's not sold by the sheet like you would buy window glass and so forth. So you may not be able to get all that you want when you go to the store. So you may have to go through, pick out the glass that you want, and then have them order enough material so that you can make all the windows that you need for your cabinet. But all around, keep glass in mind as a design element for cabinet doors. It adds a wonderful touch to it. It's not something that's modern and contemporary. Glass has been used in cabinet doors for many, many years. So you can work with it in a traditional sense with traditional woodworking, or even in a contemporary sense. So that should give you an idea of what you can do and achieve with glass paneled doors. Well, I hope you found this issue informative. The one thing I really hope you come away with is the courage to experiment, to explore, and to try some of your own ideas, even if it's just in an explorative situation such as this. If you can't afford to go out and buy some hardwood to cut up into panels to do experimentation with, pick up a sheet of 4x8 MDF. You can pick that stuff up for about $15 a sheet, and it's a great blank canvas for you to try and experiment with all those ideas that are rolling around inside your mind's eye. I'm Chris DeHut for Woodworking at Home magazine. I hope you enjoyed this issue.